Hi everyone, and welcome to week 3. This week we will be going over chapters 5 and 6. This week's objectives, and there is quite a few. So one is to define community organizing, community capacity, community participation, and empowered community. We will talk about the steps for community organizing and community building. You'll be able to state and summarize the steps in creating a health promotion program. You will be able to define the term needs assessment and explain the steps used in assessing the needs of a community and explain the differences between a goal and objective. For chapter 6, you will learn about the whole school, whole community, whole child model. Define what written school health policies are and explain their importance to having a school health program. We will also cover the 10 components of the whole school, whole community, whole child model. And we'll talk about what it's meant by a healthy school environment and discuss at least 2 major environments within the healthy school environment. And finally, define what school health education is. So for this week, there are 4 items due. One is a community effort block, which I will discuss in a minute. Chapters 5 and 6 quiz. There is a journal, and the purpose of this journal is just to have communication between you and I. Your classmates do not see our communication, so it's just really an area for private communication between you and I. And then finally, the discussion board post. The community effort blog. The purpose of this assignment is to give you an understanding of how difficult it is to bring together a group of people to focus on a specific health topic. And really, you will think about the different sides regarding a specific health issue and how it impacts people differently. So the how. Today's issue is soda pop tax. So earlier this year, actually last year, the Cook County instituted a 1 penny per ounce soda pop tax. And it was highly debated, and since then it has been withdrawn. But what I'd like you to do is to conduct an internet search on the impact of the soda pop tax based on your role. It also may be beneficial for you to look at the purpose of the soda pop tax and what those additional funds will be used for. Also for this week, there are 2 videos that describe what the soda pop tax is and what the funds are used for. So I would encourage you to watch those. So the different roles are, if you're in group 1, you are taking on the role of a soda pop company. If you are in group 2, you are taking the role of a mother or father of a family of 4. For group 3, you are taking on the role of a health educator. For group 4, you will take on the role of a restaurant owner. And for group 5, you will take on the role of a convenience store owner. So for this assignment, you will write as if you are one of those people or one of those groups of people. So what I'd like you to do then is to create a dialogue in your role. So if you are in group 1, you are coming from the aspect of the soda pop company about the issue of the soda pop tax. Do you support it? Do you not support it? And then create an argument why or why not you do or do not support it. Try to list all sides of the argument. So it's perfectly fine to say, I support it because of this, but I also don't support it because of this, right? So really consider all sides of the argument in your responses. So moving on to today's topics. Community organizing, or it's also called community building. These are when people focus on community health problems, and it can range anywhere from small to very complex problems. And community organizing is the process through which communities are helped to identify common problems or goals, to mobilize their resources, develop and implement strategies to reach the goals they have collectively set. It's really not a science, it's just an art of consensus building amongst a community. But it's important for communities to be able to organize and for people to be able to facilitate those organizing efforts. So changes in community social structure has really led to a loss of a sense of community amongst different populations. Probably with the popularity of social media, people are less likely to talk to those in their physical space or who are physically around them. And just the advances in communication, I think that people in general are less likely to speak to their neighbors and things like that. So community organizers extend beyond what community health is, but it's important for you just to recognize that that is a skill set or an art to get people together for a common purpose. So there's no single preferred model for community organizing. It's really just based on the community's needs, what the organizers' skills are, and things like that. But essentially, it's planning and policy practice, being able to develop capacity. So what is already available in the community? What resources do they already have? And social advocacy. But all models, regardless of which one you're looking at, incorporate 3 fundamental principles. 1 is to start people are. 2 is participation, so to get people actively participating in the process. And 3 is to really empower the community so that they feel that they can solve their own problems. So one of the important things in community building is assessing the community. Where are they? What do they need? And so there are 2 ways to do this. One is a needs assessment. Usually it could be a survey or focus groups to determine what the community's needs are. Do they need more food pantries? Do they need access to healthier foods? Do they need more medical clinics? More access to libraries? But it's really done to determine what the needs of that community are. The second model or method is called mapping community capacity. And what you do here is you would create a community map and identify that community's resources. So you would identify their medical clinics, the parks that they have, police stations, food pantries. So you're really trying to assess the strengths of the community and identify what resources they currently have. And then after looking at the map, you're able to identify gaps. What are they missing? What do they need? When you look at the community after doing the needs assessment and the community capacity mapping, it's now time to determine what the priorities are. And so some criteria to help you figure out what the important priority should be is to consider whether it's winnable. And what I mean by that is whether or not this problem, the solution is achievable. It must be simple and specific, especially start small so you can build on your successes. It also should be something that you can really get the members of the community behind that issue. It should affect many people. And again, the more people it impacts, the more likely you'll have the support of the community and be part of a larger plan. And a larger plan could be as simple as improving the health of the community. But the goals written really serve as a guide for problem solving and to put forward a community building model. Once you've selected your priorities and goals, it's time to seek intervention strategies. For each problem or each priority, there are many solutions for that problem. And so the next step would be to write down the different interventions and steps to solve the community problem. For each of those, you'll put what the probable outcomes can be. So what can you expect the outcomes would be? If the community would embrace the intervention, if they would accept it, probable long and short-term effects of using that intervention, and then of course the cost of resources needed for that intervention. And then the final steps for community organizing would be to implement the intervention, evaluate the intervention, create a plan for maintaining that intervention, and then looping back to see what was the impact of the intervention and do you need to still continue it, or or reduce it or eliminate it. A lot of interventions will consist of health promotion programming. And this is really an important tool for community health professionals. And there are two terms you need to be familiar with. Health education is part of health promotion, but health promotion is more encompassing than health education. Health promotion can also include policies, practices, laws. Putting fluoride in water would be considered health promotion. And so when we think about program planning, it may or may not be associated with community organizing, but it's a process by which an intervention is planned. So some intervention is put forward to solve a community health problem. When you create a health promotion program, it involves many steps, and the success of it depends on many factors. Think about if the community is willing to accept those changes or is willing to get behind the program to make it more successful, what the cost of the program is, who is actually conducting the health promotion program. All of those play a factor in how successful it is. So before the process begins, it's really important to understand and engage the priority population. Who is your audience? Who is the program intended to serve? The more involved you can encourage them to be in the program, the more likely for success. When we look at the needs of a priority population or the needs of a community, the first thing you need to do is really determine the purpose and scope of the needs assessments. It cannot be so broad where you're just trying to identify areas of weaknesses. You really need to identify the scope, meaning what specifically are you looking at? You have to gather data, you have to analyze that data, and then identify the risk factors linked to that health population or that community population. From there, you identify the program focus and then validate the prioritized need, right? So from a needs assessment, you're going to get a variety of different health problems or a variety of different areas that you want to focus on. And you need to be able to justify why you chose the ones that you chose, why you created a priority list, or how they became a priority. It's really important to set appropriate goals and objectives for your program. It's fundamental so that you can then go back and measure the success of the program, and that your goals and objectives are measurable and achievable. When we talk about goals, it's really the overarching direction of the program. Definitely more general nature, usually one sentence or a part of a sentence, does not have a deadline, takes longer to complete, and really are oftentimes not really measured in exact terms. When we think about objectives, these are much more specific than goals. These are what you're trying to achieve. The more complex the program is, the more objectives you will need to write for the program. But it's really composed of who, what, when, and how much. So here's just a really simple example of the difference between a goal and objectives. So a goal would be, after implementing the program, there will be a 30% reduction in the use of e-cigarettes in the community, right? Very broad, and I'm not really sure you would try to measure that. However, the objectives, which are measurable, could be, after going through the program, participants will be able to list at least 5 risks associated with e-cigarette and vaping use, and identify the components in e-cigarettes and vaping, right? So those are certainly measurable. You can do a questionnaire, you can do an oral examination, you can do a Likert scale, so you write the statement and say how much do you agree that you understand this concept. Many ways to measure it, but certainly measurable. There are 3 different types of objectives, and they're just summarized in here. They're also in your textbook, so I'm not going to read this whole chart to you. But the 3 are process objectives, impact objectives, and outcome objectives. So the process objectives are, how is the program going? Are you able to reach the participants you want? How many people are you reaching? Is this an effective way to implement the program? So you're looking at the program implementation. For impact objectives, this is really where you're measuring your program objectives, right? So can the people effectively list the 5 components of e-cigarettes? And then there are 3 that fall under impact objectives. So a learning objective, you're measuring knowledge. You can measure attitudes, beliefs, and skills. Behavioral objectives, you're trying to measure a change in behavior. And this is often very difficult. But you could do something like a focus group for this, where you ask people, have they reduced their e-cigarette use or eliminated their e-cigarette use? And the last is environmental objectives, so change in the environment. So this might be, if we're still using the examples of e-cigarette use, do restaurants no longer allow e-cigarette use in their facility? That would be a environmental objective. And then outcome objectives are, so what are the outcomes, right? So let's say we have reduced e-cigarette or vaping use in the community. So outcome objective would be, are people living longer? Are people less sick? Are there less lung infections, right? So the health outcome of the program is what you would be looking for in outcome objective. When we talk about implementing the intervention, so implementation is, putting the program into action, putting it into place. Generally, what you would first do is a pilot test to see how well is the program run, try to get the kinks out before you do it on a large-scale basis. And then phasing in as a step-by-step implementation. So you start implementation with small groups and then slowly build up to larger groups. When we look at evaluating the results of a program, really the purpose of this too is to determine the value or worth of the program, right? Did it work? Is it value for the money? It should occur during the first steps of program development and then also at the end. Generally, you look at two evaluations. Formative is during the program, right? So how well are you implementing it? How many people are you reaching? Are they coming to the program? Are they participating? So formative is as you're forming the program, how well are you reaching the people? Whereas summative, you would do at the conclusion of the program. The steps to evaluating a program's effectiveness. So one is to engage your stakeholders in the measurement, in the evaluation. And stakeholders are anyone who have a stake or have an interest in the program. Oftentimes it's people who've contributed money to the program, government officials, some citizens, the general public, participants in the program. So people who have an interest in the program. You would describe the program in an evaluation and again, focus on what the purpose of the program is, what the goals are, and what the objectives are. And then you would focus on the evaluation design. So whatever design you would choose, there are many different evaluation designs, which is beyond the scope of this course. You would have to gather credible data. So credible data is like surveys, people who have experience with collecting and organizing data. It is not, oh, my friend's sister said the program was great, right? That's not credible data. You would have to justify your conclusions. So you gather data, you analyze it, and from that you create some conclusions. When you create the conclusions, you need to be able to justify using the data that was collected. And then the last is ensure use and share lessons learned. So how can this program be used in the future? How can it be changed to make it better? What are some lessons learned? So if you had to do it over again, what would you change? We're moving on now to the next chapter, and we're talking about school health. And so a wide model that's used is the whole school, whole community, whole child model. It's really a model that's focused on addressing the educational and health needs of children within school. Community strengths can boast the role of school in addressing child health, learning needs, but it also becomes a center for the community and reflects the needs of that community. It really provides a framework for schools and the community to work together to create health, better health for all. So there is a need for school health. So first, an unhealthy child has a difficult time learning. Some of the successes that have been in the past for school health are having, a free breakfast and lunch program for students who are in financial need, right? We know that students learn better if they're not thinking about food and if they're not hungry. So that has been a huge improvement. And health and school success are very, very closely aligned. The healthier a person is, then they're able to focus on academics and learning. And really, so the school health program really integrates education and health. So there are many ways to create local school policies. However, this is just one example of how to do it. So you build a policy development team. And again, this should include the school officials, community members, parents, and students. Assess the environment. So what's going on? If you had to describe the current health of the school and community, how would that be done? And then you would draft a policy. You draft a policy for health, you would share it with the community, get feedback, and then you would adopt that policy and implement it. And then again, just like the program planning we spoke about earlier, you would measure and evaluate the impact of that policy and communicate those results to the greater community. Policy development should be executed by the School Health Council and should really cover all facets of the school health program and gain approval from the key stakeholders. Currently, the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, periodically conducts natural surveys to assess school health policies and practice. In addition, there is a study called the School Health Policy and Practices Study that also conducts surveys with schools to see how well their school health policy is holding up. And they look at the school health policies and school health practices at the state, district, school, and classroom level. So they really go from a large view, so the state view, down to districts, down to schools, down to the actual classrooms to see how well they're being implemented. When we look at the components of the WSCC model, there are many, as you can see here, and it includes administration, organization, school health services, so you think about like the nursing services at school, counselors, social workers, and so forth. Having a healthy school environment, so there's clean water, it's clean in general. School health education, that is a component of the model. So it is what is the school health education? Who provides the school health education? In my previous role, I was a school health educator and I only taught health education classes. However, in my children's school, their school health classes are taught by their PE teacher, who is also endorsed in health education. Again, they have counseling, psychological, and social services, that there is physical education, and that there are opportunities for physical activity, that there is a nutrition environment and services. I know at my son's middle school, there is no pop. So if students want to get a drink at school, that there's healthy alternatives such as milk. That you include the community in the school, because the school tends to be a focal point for communities. That you engage the family, and then also you engage the employees in some sort of employee wellness program, right? So the healthier the personnel and the teachers are at the school, those provide role models for the students. So the primary health content for school health education, and you probably remember this from your own experience being in health education classes. So we have alcohol and other drugs, eating healthy, mental and emotional health, personal health and wellness, physical activity, safety, unintentional injury prevention, sexual health, which would include abstinence and risk avoidance, which would be using condoms and things like that, tobacco, and violence prevention. When we look at how teachers develop the curriculum for school health, there are many available from many national specialties. There is an approved curriculum from state departments of health or departments of education or health. There's health agencies and associations, and obviously commercially produced curriculum. Most schools align their standards with the National Health Education Standards, which if you look in your book, Chapter 6, there is a few pages dedicated to show you what those National Health Education Standards are. The last thing, so As we see more incidents of violence in schools, this has become a major concern for communities. So there have been a lot of policies and curriculum that are focusing on bullying and bullying prevention, electronic aggression, which would be bullying in social media or Facebook or Instagram, whatever, and then recommendations for improving the school climate as it relates to violence. This concludes um, our video for week 3. I hope you have a wonderful week. And as always, if you have any questions, email me or call me or come see me, and we'll do my best to help you out. Have a great week.